Hi, my name is Jay Oza. I coach people win with their speeches, either through these videos that you're watching or perhaps one on one coaching. I want to talk about questions. I think in any situation, no matter what it is, there are two questions you have to be ready to ask. And like I said, no matter what situation it is, whether it's informal or formal. And they are, I call them uncomfortable question and a tough question. You have to be prepared, and you should also have a plan B depending on how the person reacts. Now, these are not the same. An uncomfortable question is not a hard question, it's not a tough question, it's just uncomfortable. It's like taking a 2x4 and hitting somebody on the head, like, whoa, where did that come from? Who hit me on the head? It's that type of question. I'll give you a couple of examples. Do you remember in that movie Godfather Part 2 where Michael Corleone is meeting Hyman Roth in this hotel in Cuba and he's supposed to be bringing the money and he didn't? And they exchange some niceties and then Michael Corleone kind of hits him, Hyman Roth, the 2x4 and says, "Who had Patanjali killed?" That's an uncomfortable question. Hyman Roth was like, I don't know, Rosado Brothers? Like he just blurted something out. He was hit by a 2x4. That's an uncomfortable question. Let me give you some practical ones. Let's say you're at a car dealer and you want to buy a car. And, you know, one of the sales rep is driving you, it takes you out for a test drive and you're driving and you know, you've been there for a while. This is not some question you start asking right away the first time you meet. Kind of develop that rapport. And as you're test driving, you just say, hey, how much will you make if I buy this car? That's an uncomfortable question. Nobody asks that. And see how he reacts. And you can say, well, I hope I can help you make that money. Now you might say, well, why would you ask that question? And here's the reason. See, when you go to a car dealer, yes, you have the money and they have the car, but the power is not with you like you think it is. And the reason is simple. You're in their territory. When you're in their territory, you don't have the home court advantage. They get to decide how they show it. They control everything. You're not controlling anything. The only thing you control are questions. And you've got to ask an uncomfortable question there. One last example that I just thought about. So just recently, my daughter had a dinner with a distant relative in New York City. And when she came home, I asked her, being a nosy dad, I said, you know, is she married? And she said, my daughter said, no, she's not married. It was a female. And then I asked her, so I said, is she seeing somebody? And my daughter kind of took offense at that. Dad, I can't ask her that. And I was like, why not? You know, you can have a plan B if she gets offended by that. Say, hey, I was just trying to see if you're seeing, and if not, I could perhaps, you know, connect you to other people that I know of. So I said, you should have a plan B, but she kind of took offense at that. She didn't want to even ask an uncomfortable question. And I think uncomfortable questions are very important. Either that'll help you connect, or the person's going to be so offended that it's probably better that you don't even deal with that person. So I'm a firm believer of asking uncomfortable questions. Now, here's a little caveat. If you're going to go there, make sure you have a plan B so that the person doesn't feel like somehow you are just that person who's trying to make them look bad. So you got to come back with something so that the person feels like, oh, he just kind of went there, but that's not the way, that's not the line of questioning. He's not like suddenly a you know, prosecutor that keeps asking these questions. It's one question, that's it. You only get to ask one uncomfortable question. Okay, the second one is a tough question. Now, a tough question is to really see if the person you're talking to is really legitimate. Whether he's BSing you or the person really, really knows the stuff. But before you can ask that question, you got to know your stuff to the point. So, let's say you're at a job interview, and this is, let's say, you are talking to a manager. And a tough question for the manager would be the following. So listen, I like this job. Or maybe you can say this may not be a tough, maybe this is an uncomfortable, I don't think it's an uncomfortable question, but it's something he's going to have to think about. You be the judge. And the question is following. Let's say you like the job. So listen, I like the job, but here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to talk to two ex-employees that you had. One who left voluntarily and one who didn't. And I want to kind of get a perspective from them on what it's like working for you. Now, if this manager is any decent manager, he should have kept in touch with both of them. And if he said, oh, I can't give you that or whatever, then obviously this manager is not a good manager. He hasn't even kept in touch with people who work for him. Now, the reason I say that is simple because I have a manager that terminated me more than a decade ago, and I still keep in touch with him. You know, business things happen. And sometimes the person may not be the right fit, but that doesn't mean that the person cannot have one-on-one relationship even after the person is let go. That's really a tough question for a manager that I think everybody should ask that when they go for an interview. If you're not asking that question, then you probably don't have the power. You're not trying to change the power equation there at all. And you're desperate to get the job, which most people are, and they never ask that question. But I think it's a very important question to ask because you want to know how the manager treats people, whether they leave voluntarily or involuntarily. The other one is, let's say again, at a car dealer. And you want to ask a question that he hasn't thought about. And if he's a good salesman, he should know this. And this, to do the research, you can go and look at and see what people think about a particular car and the reasons that they don't like the car. And let's say you pick three of them, the three top ones. You ask the sales guy, so tell me 3 reasons why people don't buy this car. And if he doesn't know the 3 reasons that you come up with doing the research, then this guy doesn't know his stuff. A sales guy should know why people buy the car and why they don't buy the car. Like, I'll tell you one time, I went and this was a while back. At that time, I was kind of not sure whether I wanted to buy a Honda Accord versus a Toyota Camry. And as I was going for test driving the car, I was test driving a Camry. And I think it might have been a Honda, now I think about it. It was a Honda I was test driving. And I asked the guy, I said, tell me, why would somebody buy a Camry over a Honda Accord? And the guy gave me a good answer. And it made me think. He said, Honda they're both good. First he said, they're both good cars. He said, you can't go wrong with either purchasing a Honda or purchasing a Camry. So right away he wasn't trying to trash the car. But he said, what I find is that people, when they don't buy a Honda or a Camry, is because Honda has a much better feel when you're driving. A Camry is a much smoother car. It's a different type of a car compared at that time to a Honda. Honda is a driver's car, whereas a Camry is a more of a car that you want to just drive long distance and feel good. It's a smooth car. And he said people notice that and they tend to buy a Camry over Honda if that's what they're looking for. But he said otherwise you can't go wrong. And he's right. I mean, obviously, both cars are excellent at that time. This was, I think, was in the 90s when I was looking for that, when I was trying to purchase the car. And that convinced me that, it gave me more information. And since my wife was more interested in having a feel of a Camry, we ended up purchasing a Camry. But the person answered the question, it gave me the information, and I had done my research, and I knew that was the reason. But I just had to ask that because I wanted to test whether this guy was legitimate or he was going to trash one over the other. And the guy was a good salesman, and I told him, listen, whether I buy the car or not, but you're pretty good at your job. And in fact, afterwards, I actually have recommended people, and a few years later, I did end up purchasing a Honda. So these questions are very important, uncomfortable and tough. You cannot go into any situation without having both of these questions ready and prepared. It could be different as far as how your relationship goes. And I, I think this is something that I try to practice, maybe more than I should be, because I think these are very important questions that you have to be ready to ask. Because let's face it, we have such a brief moment with people, and you've got to make decisions quickly. Is this the person I'm going to trust? Is this person competent? Basically, what it's coming down to is trust, competence, and trust is if the person is not willing to answer an uncomfortable question, or definitely even just say, I'll answer it, but why are you asking this question? The person should not be suddenly freaking out, like, why did you ask me that question? If you can't trust them with that, then you want to see whether the person is competent. So these are trust, competence, and I think they're very important in any situation you find yourself in. Whether you're buying a car, whether you want a relationship, whether you're looking for a job, whether you want to do business, or whether you want to have some kind of relationship with somebody. This is my way of figuring out quickly whether this is going to go any further or not. Well, that's the two questions. It's time for you to tell me what you think of this. Is this something you do? What kind of questions do you ask? What's an uncomfortable? Do you ask uncomfortable questions, and do you even prepare for them? And do you ask tough questions in situations in which you find yourself in? And again, thank you for watching, and let me know what you think.